Welcome everybody, this is Video Mode, a history of pinball video games, and I'm sat down with Adam Volker and Bodan Sayer from Flight School HQ.
Yeah, hey everybody.
Hello, hello.
So, you guys developed Creature in the Well. Can you tell us a little bit about the game in case the viewers haven't seen it in action?
Sure. Do you want me to do that, Bo? Or do you want to do that?
Yeah, go for it.
Creature in the Well is a top-down hack-and-slash adventure game, but instead of like traditional combat, swords fighting monsters and enemies of that type, you are in a giant, ancient pinball machine, and every room that you go through is like a tiny circuit board of pinball, bouncy, breakout mechanics with a third-person controller. So you play as a robot named Bot C, who is the last of an engineering collective whose job it was to make this machine hundreds and maybe thousands of years ago. And you wake up in the middle of the desert and sort of pick up where you left off, not really sure what your purpose was. You got a bit of amnesia. And you run into the creature in the darkness, which is like a pair of eyes and skeletal hands who's set on stopping you to complete your work.
Right. So, when you started making the game, was the pinball element already sort of in your minds, or was that something that you came to naturally?
Yeah.
Yes and no?
A bit of both.
Yeah.
Maybe yes, maybe it was, but we didn't realize it.
Right. So, how did you come to it then?
We had a couple of references, like air hockey was a big one, and just like, that type of like soccer, like Rocket League type setup as well, where we're just kind of like, yeah, we want a third-person controller, something that feels like Zelda-y, top-down, but it's going to be about like bouncing balls around a room and like potentially doing anything with them. We were like, maybe you shoot them into goals and it's it's kind of multiplayer, or maybe it's just kind of you bounce them off objects and stuff. This was all in the prototype. We just started experimenting, and once we like threw some objects in there that the balls could bounce off of, we were messing a lot with like breakout, or brick breaker game type mechanics. So
Yeah.
you like hit a bumper a couple of times and then it'll go down or disappear and stuff. And so it became more and more puzzly, and then we just started realizing like there are a lot of similarities to pinball, so we'd pull a lot of elements from that.
Okay. But it's not like a traditional pinball game. It sort of pulls in them elements, but it doesn't stick to the sort of two controls. You've got a lot more freedom of movement.
We really wanted to create a setup where like you as a player are trying to master control over an external object, the ball that you're bouncing around, or in this case like tons of balls, because we have this multi-ball setup of like you can have a lot of them moving around at one time.
Yeah. It was very big on the multi-ball when I played. Which to be fair, is one of the most fun things about traditional pinball games, is that when you get a multi-ball and you got four things whizzing around, trying to keep them all under control. So, have you sort of played quite a lot of pinball games before, sort of either traditional tables or traditional video games?
Yes.
Maybe on the low end.
Yeah, we played
Yeah.
some. We always sort of have this sort of full disclosure moment where it's like, we do love pinball and we have played a bunch of it, but like, don't ask me what my favorite cab is because I don't remember.
Maybe Simpsons or something. There's a cab at college, and I remember it being in like the dep or like the convenience store or whatever.
We did sort of like, I have a huge folder of just like really beautiful close-up shots of pinball machines that influenced a ton of the visual design of the project, and it's been sort of like my first really, how do I say this, like pay some respects to the medium of pinball machines and all of that through the development of the game, just because like I had to take such a closer look than I ever had before at like how the lights worked, and like there's parts of the system that you might not notice as like a regular casual interloper.
Yeah.
Like I have been.
There's such like good juice and feedback to pinball machines, and we wanted to capture that and also have a design language that made it clear like what should and shouldn't be hit with a ball, and just like have things bounce around a lot. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely got that sense when I was playing it that there was some. You had been informed by those physical objects, and that's what they are really, just like these massive physical things. And yeah, I really got that sense when I was playing the game. So one thing I did want to ask about, because a lot of pinball video games struggle with this, physics. And I think when I've played games that are meant to be a table, the physics are kind of the deal breaker, as it were. If they're not quite right, then you've not really got a very good game on your hands. But with a game like Creature in the Well, you can kind of get away with sort of less realistic physics, can't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that the ball movement is not even real physics. It's just a lot of like calculating bounce angles and stuff, and then just kind of fudging a few things to make everything feel more controlled. That was like going with raw physics, or if we just kind of say like, yeah, when the ball hits any object in the scene that does have a physical collider on it and bounces off it, having like all these like possible bounce angles and all these possible scenarios of tables just created a lot of situations where like maybe the ball gets trapped, or like maybe you lose control over it for too long and you're like, what am I supposed to do? So we started to try to figure out ways to like give the player more control over the situation and make it so that they felt like they could reliably get the ball back or strategize or plan like an angle or a shot or something. Became more like billiards, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah. And like I've said, that's something that you kind of get with pinball, but it's a lot more chaotic in a traditional table. So, did you... I mean, when I've looked back at the history of pinball video games, there was a huge explosion of them in sort of the 90s. Were you sort of around during that time? Are you aware of that?
I played a couple on like... man, what version of Windows? There were like some pinball games that just like came stock on like Windows 95 or something.
Yeah, that was huge, that wasn't it? Bit of trivia for you, that was called Full Tilt, and it was developed by Maxis, same people behind SimCity.
Wow.
Yeah, it gives you some example of like how much we actually know about pinball, but
well, that's fine. I mean, pinball's so accessible that you don't really need to have sort of a vested interest in it to enjoy it.
How to play it.
Yeah, exactly.
It might have been the late 90s, early aughts, but I was, let's say, it would have been like 10 in 96, so I would have been maybe going to arcades, and I feel like I caught, like, as a kid, the very, very tail end of, like, arcades being still a thing and still fun and, not sort of like sad ghost towns that they are now at the mall. But yeah, that would have been like when I played a bunch of stuff. I do remember like them always being like, they're kind of like carnival. They're like gaming was starting to change, right? Where it was you were adding things like Time Crisis and like DDR and like whatever else to the arcades, and it felt like a very new type of gaming. And pinball sort of felt like classic. The first, classic and very kind of like physical in a way that the newer games were never.
So raw.
Yeah. And it was really unique and special, I felt like, for that reason.
Yeah, I can see that, and there are new places cropping up now, new arcades that have a little bit of pinball in them.
Yeah, for sure. There's a barcade in Montreal actually that we went to for an unrelated party, and it was only pinball machines. And
oh, wow,
it's like holy crap! And they just had like rows and rows of them. It's just like the specialty of this location. So I feel like there's cool like almost like boutique arcades that are like being created to like focus and emphasize these awesome things.
Yeah, there's a museum in Rotterdam as well, specifically for pinball. I think there may be one in Texas somewhere like that as well.
That's likely.
Yeah, it's big enough anyway.
At Flight School has an office in Dallas, Texas, and we were there for a while. And there is a bunch of like huge strip mall type arcade places, and we went once, and just like it was really, really fun. Played a lot of Dragon's Lair that day.
Oh wow.
Anyway, yeah, those definitely exist.
Yeah, North Star is the name of the Montreal bar that we went to.
That's what it was called.
Right. If I ever find myself in Montreal, I'll definitely hit that place up.
Which was kind of ironic because one of the dungeons in our game was called the North Star Conduit, and I was like, is this a... like, we had no idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, was that on purpose, but...
No, what?
Just a happy coincidence.
Uh-huh.
So, just going back to that, there was a game in particular, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, called 3D Ultra Pinball, and Creature in the Well really reminded me of that, specifically the third game, which has some sort of action elements in it. But they're controlled with just the standard pinball controls. So was it a challenge for you to create pinball tables that worked with the control scheme that you picked?
Yeah, for sure. Like iterating on that control scheme, on that like what the player can do or should do or is gonna do, was really like the hardest part of this, because we didn't have a lot of example like gameplay. Really, we didn't have a lot of other games out there that we could reference for that core bit of the gameplay. We could reference, other cool ball games, even like Plinko. At one point we're like, yeah, it should be fun to just like hit a ball through a bunch of pegs and have it bounce around 100 times. But like getting the player controller right was just a mix of iterating on a lot of things. Some of the key things we messed with were like when you first started, you pretty much just had kind of like if you played the game, a strike weapon only, a strike tool only, which just meant you could bounce the ball off of yourself, but it also meant you had to intercept the ball exactly where it was going to be, and you had to both aim and redirect the ball all in one hit. So like it was incredibly difficult. At one point we were like, all right, we need to be able to like catch the ball and like move it or like rearrange where your shot is coming from so you can line up like good shots and stuff like that. So we introduced this alternate tool. So you had this like, yin and yang of like catching the ball and slowing things down, and then aiming and shooting the ball and launching it where you needed to go. And that kind of unlocked a lot of other things like multi-ball and stuff like that. So we really went through like so many iterations of just trying to figure out how the player controller would interact with, the balls that are in the game.
Is that where you started to think about sort of the different weapons and tools that you could have as well in the game, and all the loot?
Yeah, for sure. I think when we made that transition, we were talking about like what's the coolest thing to do in our game, and we kept coming back to like, I want to skill shot a bumper. I want to like line up a shot and aim it and like feel really cool for, when you get on a table, like a pinball table, you get the ball into the back and it bounces around a bunch, right? Yeah. That's that feeling of like I aimed and shot it back there on purpose was what we were after. Yeah. And then like Bo was saying, when we switched it from just like hitting the ball once to being able to catch and aim at the same time, that allowed players to do that. And that was kind of when I feel like it clicked, the game clicked.
Yeah. So even in a room with like a dense grid of bumpers, we'll still allow enough space for you to try to like sneak the ball through so it can get into the back and then just like wreak havoc on everything and rack up a lot of points and stuff.
And it's super satisfying when I think there was a part where you have to ricochet a ball across like a round section of load of bumpers, and if you manage to get the angle just right, it just bounces off them all in sequence. Yeah, that's super satisfying.
Yeah, there's lots stuff like that.
Yeah, and they were all in bits with the that single bumper in the middle where the ball was magnetized towards them. They were a lot of fun.
Yeah, with the power wells, as we call them.
Yeah, that's something that you just cannot do in real pinball either. So I guess that was quite liberating in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Just wanted something that felt like a reward, like a legit reward, and just like instead of just giving you a big number, like you did it. You got a score bonus. We're like, let's just have it be physical and have it be like another bumper that just completes itself and is a lot of fun.
So it is more like a traditional.
Charges up balls too. So like the balls in our game can be charged so that the longer you charge them up with your weapon, the more like energy basically or power they transfer into the bumpers they hit, and that's how you like generate power in the temple, and you spend that power to like open doors and progress and continue through the game. And so these power wells also actually are a way to like charge the balls up to a super high level that's actually higher than like your weapons can charge the ball to. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. So I was just going to say it's more like a traditional table than it looks, just because of that physical element as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely get a sense of the origins of it in that case. So I just wanted to ask, I mean, you guys, you've sort of grown up with pinball, and that is perhaps where the inspiration came to make a pinball game. So what do you think about the pinball games that were in the 90s, the explosion of them? What do you think the inspiration was for making them? Because I mean, the way I see it, people who made them will have grown up with pinball as well, but it was almost like a challenge to program the physics, and a lot of people in the 80s were saying that. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on it.
The way I approach design is is like always sort of looking at what's working in an abstract for like play, and it could be card like 52 deck card games or board games or stickball or like, you know, anything, like any version of play that exists, and like try to recreate it in a video game. And I feel like that was what was happening a lot in gaming in the 80s and 90s, where it was still a pretty infant medium, and it was like, well, what other types of play have we not digitized? And I feel like if I was going to take a guess, that would be my guess, that like trying to tackle the physics and the fun of a physical thing like pinball, like a pinball table in a digital space would be an interesting challenge, right?
For sure.
If like Doom came out in '95, then like we're talking about like gaming's modern thrust like hadn't really happened yet, or maybe was just happening. So I feel like we were maybe still looking backwards to like what do we already play that we can make into a video game.
I also imagine, yeah, like, and technically I imagine it was pretty difficult because pinball is such like because it's so analog, it's like very fast paced, and it's like the physics of it are very like twitchy and immediate. And I imagine that like frame rate and just like all these other things were kind of a factor in influencing like how it actually felt in the long run, of just like making sure that people could respond and like things happened as you would expect them to do in the real world.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to see like, yeah, if I hit ball with stick at angle, it should go that way. And if it doesn't, then you're like, what is happening? Physics is broken.
Yeah, I suppose the other advantage is that you don't have to keep repairing them, so that might have been part of the draw for people who were playing those games.
Yeah, and you can get fantastical with it, you know? You can just like make ornate shapes and details that are just like not practical in physical manufacturing, or, you know.
Definitely.
Lots of cool effects and
the
dragons coming out of holes, spewing fire and shit.
The restrictions change in an interesting way, don't they? Like a pinball machine, or like the ability to literally produce the rubber and metal that make up a bumper, like some of those restrictions go away. So maybe the design space seemed like it was really deep because you could change, you know, it could be infinitely long or large, or the bumpers could like, change stuff that they couldn't change in the physical world.
Yeah. And do you think then that there's a potential for pinball to come back? I mean, I know we've had Creature in the Well, and we've had other games like Yoku's Island Express that was a relatively big hit. I mean, it got a lot of news coverage at the time, and there's also games like Pinball FX3 that are bringing back the sort of traditional thing. So do you think there's a chance for pinball to sort of come back in a big way, or do you think it's going to remain sort of a niche thing?
That's tough to say. I feel like people are always going to have an interest in just like simple physics games. You know, it's like there's something so clean and nice about a ball game. Like we talked about that when we started Creature. It's just kind of like any game that involves a ball, soccer, basketball, whatever. It just has this natural flow and tension of like, you know, when you make a shot or the ball is traveling, there's the moment of suspense where you're like, is it going to go in there? Is it going to miss? Is it going to whatever? So there's this like inherent framework to ball physics games that I feel like is really appealing. And I feel like pinball's in that range, you know. So I can't say if it's gonna like surge as much as it had before, but I feel like it's around.
Yeah, there's always going to be an audience for it.
Yeah,
Definitely. That just about covers what I had to ask. So unless you've got anything else, any other burning things you want to add?
It's fun to talk about the game with this much distance. You know, we did a lot of like ramp up to discussing, you know, because we were talking about it's coming out, and then like right after it came out, we talked about it a lot with a lot of people, and now it's kind of nice to look back on it. I mean, it hasn't even been that long. It's like 6 months. But like
that many years ago, a decade ago.
Yeah, listen to me, man. Holy moly. But it's nice to just, I feel like I have more perspective on what it actually is now.
Yeah, it's almost like looking at it with fresh eyes, isn't it?
Yeah, so thanks for your time, I guess, that's what I'm trying to say. Thanks for asking.
That was quite all right. Yeah, your insight's going to be very useful, I think. And it's really good to hear from a game developer's perspective, because, I mean, I'm just a passive gamer, you know. I don't know anything. But you guys are a lot more knowledgeable than I am in this field, so... Yeah.
I feel like the takeaway from the designing of this type of game is really just that like nothing is ever as obvious as it seems once you've played something and you're like, oh yeah, that's how it works and how it should have worked the whole time and how it needed to work. When you're iterating on it, you're just kind of like blind and you're like, we could go 1,000 directions with this. Each of them is possibly a good idea, you know? And just like really trying stuff out and messing with it and responding to it and iterating with it is really kind of what leads you to a lot of things. So
yeah, just about giving it a try.
It's such an interesting space to try to like mess with and design something that's just kind of raw and physical like that.
Yeah, definitely. So if people want to find Creature in the Well and maybe buy it, where would you point them to?
Yeah, so you can go to creatureinthewell.com, or you can find us on Twitter @CreatureWell, and you can buy it on all major platforms: PS4, Xbox, Switch, PC, on Steam and GOG, and all those things.
Oh, no DOS version. Terrible.
Sorry.
And if people wanted to find you, where can they look? If you want people to find you, that is.
I'm on Twitter @Boden, which is my first name, Bohdon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on Twitter @AVolkertron.
Very cool. Is that like Robotron?
Yeah, I got the nickname from a friend in college, and she was just it just like stuck. It's kind of like a Voltron because my last name is Volker, so it's like Voltron, Volkertron. Anyway, I've never been as cool as she is, so I just kept and haven't come up with anything better since then.
You got to make up for it somehow.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.